Alright, you guys. Hi. Well, this is a status update for all of you. This is March 13th, 2013, and it's 2:33 in the morning. If you're wondering why I'm up at 2:33 in the morning, that would be part one of this video. My best friend actually locked his keys in his car and decided that he would call me up. And I drove out there and actually brought a katana type thing to pop his door open. Anyways, as you notice, or may not have noticed, I have shaved my goatee to mimic the ideas that many of you may already have. Yes, I am Satan. It's okay. Well, actually, I swear I'm not Satan. I'm actually just second in command. But with that being said, at the moment, I'm actually working on a seance paper, a article that I'm writing up for a journal, and it is actually going to be talking about experimental seance procedures and explaining a lot of the results and experiments that I've conducted in the seance room. I'll be giving a decently in-depth discussion of what I think about the phenomena itself that actually happened. Bit of skepticism about some of the results and whatnot. But in the paper, I'm actually going to be talking about many different things. In a lot of people's minds, they tend to think that parapsychology is a field where people already believe in the paranormal. In other words, the investigators start out with the default position that paranormal or psychic phenomena actually happen. And that's not necessarily the case. A lot of researchers have been drawn to those conclusions based on their research. But by definition, being a parapsychologist, it's simply someone who studies anomalous human experiences, claims of paranormal phenomena. In that sense, a lot of people, well, actually, by not understanding that, a lot of people try and make big distinctions between the new field, anomalistic psychology, which is of the ilk of Chris French and people like that, and it's kind of developed a pretty big following in England already. And they try and distinguish that field from parapsychology, when in fact there are a few differences between the focal points, but they don't. I would actually consider anomalistic psychology to be a subcategory of parapsychology. Anomalistic psychology studies the psychology of belief in the paranormal, typically. Parapsychology focuses on the claims themselves. In other words, whether or not people can really do these things or whether or not these things happen. And trying to account for the anomalies. And anomalistic psychology plays into that, obviously. But a lot of people have the misconception that, mainstream parapsychologists and academic parapsychologists are somehow pseudoscientific in that they are starting from the position that these things are real. It's not true. In fact, I don't even necessarily believe in paranormal phenomena at all. I consider myself a skeptic. That being said, there are a lot of cases. When we're evaluating these things, we have to, make sure that, regular explanations like fraud, suggestibility in, certain situations, malobservation, different normal explanations that could account for these anomalies. We have to make sure that those aren't candidates, in other words, to explain what we've witnessed or what other people have witnessed. And, until we can do that, we can't even entertain the possibility of paranormal explanations or psi-based explanations. In that sense, parapsychology is really simply, in its broadest interpretation, the study of anomalous human experiences, things which are, typically held outside the range of regular scientific inquiry. And because of the nature of what we're studying in general, these fields are often regarded as taboo areas of inquiry, and that is mainly owing to the possibility that some of these things may be genuine. A lot of people And I'm not saying that any of them are. I'm saying that we have to be open to that possibility. But a lot of people operate under the idea that all of science, everything we know about it, would be overturned if these paranormal anomalies, actually prove to be genuine or, genuinely psychic in nature or indicative of survival of consciousness, for example. But that's not necessarily the case. I kind of agree with most other parapsychologists in saying that this would really just broaden our spectrum. It would broaden our understanding of science, of human experience, and whatnot. Because if you dismiss an entire field of phenomena without really considering what they seem to be and actually giving them an adequate hearing and trying to figure out what's really going on, then that is actually very unscientific, because you're not going to get a full and adequate picture of what's going on. If you dismiss a whole spectrum, a whole part of the spectrum of human experience, you're only going to see one half of it, and you're going to miss out on a lot of things that could be very insightful. And yeah, actually, I'm writing that seance article, and it is going to basically try and lay out a experimental procedure when dealing with claims of seance phenomena, and I'm hoping that it may even start some other seance groups, and maybe we can experimentally replicate some core seance phenomena or claimed seance phenomena. I think that's the only way to really adequately assess what's going on. There were steps in that direction in the past with the work of Kenneth Batchelor and other parapsychologists. I know the SORAT group was also interested in that type of stuff, but there are a lot of allegations of fraud against what they did, and some of them are pretty warranted, I think. But when you look at the whole history of spiritualism and psychical research into those areas, there's a whole spectrum or whole underlying phenomenology that seems to occur. You have raps, you have noises, like creaks and scratchy noises in the seance room, and I've experienced that, and I'm going to be writing about experiences that I dealt with in the seance room. In one particular instance, once we started using red light, and I always have the seances lighted. I'm a conjurer. I actually have a very good understanding of fraudulent seance techniques, which kind of developed out of my interest in seance phenomena in general, because I wanted to see if any of it was legitimate. But there was a core of things that started to happen, and these things were reported in the spiritualist literature of the past. So it really made me consider that maybe some of these things are legitimate. For example, in doing table tipping, where the hands are on the table, we noticed that at one point, and this is before we even instituted red light, but knocking noises started to come all across the tabletop. I couldn't duplicate that. I know that it's possible to, with changes in temperature and pressure on a table, you can actually cause noises and creaks in a table, but these were completely different, and they actually sounded like knocks. But obviously that isn't the best evidence for paranormality. But it actually extended to, eventually these things actually started extending to other areas of the room. The knocking noises on the table extended to a table in the corner where nobody was sitting at. And I couldn't explain that. Someone had their chair pulled backwards a few times actually, and the second or third time that happened, I got underneath the table, held their feet, and I actually watched their feet very closely. They held their feet off the floor, and everybody else was watching the person's hands on the top of the table. And obviously I couldn't watch their hands myself because I was underneath the table. But even under that particular, and even under that, the chair actually slid back a few inches again, and I couldn't explain that. I know that, and this was in good light, remember, but that was actually something that really got to me when it happened. A lot of other things happened. Eventually, the knocking noises extended to a table that no one was sitting at, and they were very distinct, very loud. In the last few seances that we did at the Sticks, there were scratchy noises on the walls. They had actually, it seemed to fill the entire room. Those are things that I can't explain, and they seem to defy our rational explanations. But looking through the past history of spiritualism, those results actually seem to be early results in dealing with seance phenomena. They seem to be pretty universal in a lot of the seances. So what I'm interested in is seeing if there's a core to it, if there's some type of underlying truth to these things, whether that indicates some type of survival after death with deceased people doing that, or whether that is a sort of psychokinesis. I don't know. These are all questions that we can explore in more depth, but I consider fraud to be out of the question in those particular circumstances. And it's actually kind of remarkable to me. I'll be writing up that paper and going in as much depth as I can about what happened, and hopefully giving some guidelines for some measure of replicability for other people who are interested in trying to duplicate what we did. And hopefully I'll be able to do some bits of some more extensions to the research in the future. One of the key members of the group is actually in basic training right now for the National Guard, so he's not around, and we haven't really held any seances since the summer of 2012. But those things really convinced me that there is something legitimate to certain claims. And it seems remarkable that we dismiss all these things as being the result of fraud, malobservation, and there are so many claims in and of themselves. Of course, there are natural explanations for, or normal, so-called normal explanations for a vast majority of these things. But there seems to be some element of truth to these things, and I really want to explore that in a lot of depth. But the fact is, we don't know a lot, or as much as we think we do, about a lot of the things in this remarkable world we live in. So, I've actually talked too much. I probably need to get a little drink of water. And, I think that, yeah. Anyways, if anybody questions my competence as a conjurer or a magician, I have a very strong interest in psychology, and parapsychology to me is an extension of that. It seems to be that if we focus only on the regular experiences that most people experience every day, we really do miss out on a very large portion of the spectrum that is human experience. I really want to explore that, and in fact, with this new article is not the first thing I've tried to publish. I had Michael Tim from the Academy of Spiritual and Consciousness Studies ask me to actually write this up. I've written up a summary of my experiences in the seance room, and I went into a little bit of depth, but I'm going to try and go into more depth with what's coming. I've actually gotten quite a bit of the paper done. I'm going to probably cite after I explain what happened in the seance room and some of my interpretations of what could have happened. And I'm not really impressed by a lot of the early mental results that we got, because they possibly were the result of cryptomnesia and maybe even some bits of not necessarily conscious fraud, but maybe phishing on the part of the mediums. So the question, and obviously they weren't doing it purposefully, but I think that because I know these people. The person that I actually tried or started doing these experiments with is my best friend. And I had another really good friend of mine get involved in it shortly after the first person got involved in it. So not only do I trust these people, and obviously you can't trust people and just say that you can't take someone's word on it when they claim that they weren't cheating or something, that you can't take their word on it. But there were adequate controls in place, but with the early results didn't convince me of anything paranormal or preternormal, I guess. What convinced me are a lot of the later things. The early stuff was really interesting, but I think that there was a lot of subconscious impersonation, and it's really everything that we experienced possibly was riddled with the subconscious mind of the people who were developing as mediums. Because I started off trying to develop these people through hypnosis. But I don't want to go in too much depth about it now. I'm going to publish the article soon, hopefully, and hopefully I'll finish it soon. I've already published in Paranthropology, the Journal of Anthropological Approaches to the Paranormal. I published in the January edition, Volume 4, 1A, and you can find that on paranthropologyjournal.weebly.com. There are also some really interesting contributions by a friend of mine, Cal Cooper, who wrote about Alex Tanos and the OBE phenomena associated with him, and also the OBE distinction between OBEs and astral projection, and if there should be a distinction. But and that's up for debate. But this is a very wide or broad field, actually. Parapsychology is a field of inquiry that needs to bridge or become bridged with mainstream academia. When we're dealing with people who are really cynical of these things, usually they haven't experienced things that they would consider paranormal. So what I've found is people who have had experiences like this, they're more open to these things and considering that they are paranormal. People who've never experienced anything like this, they're not. And neither approach is necessarily bad. It's just a reflection of our experiences and how we look at the world, how we shape everything, and basically approach reality. Obviously, if something is in accordance with my experiences, I'll be more likely to consider it. If someone had told me that they got abducted by aliens, I'm probably going to dismiss that as some type of hallucination, or maybe they're just lying or something, but that's because it's not a part of my experience. If someone says they claim that they saw a ghost, people who've seen ghosts would be more open to thinking that it was a legitimate experience, while people who've never experienced something like that, it becomes very impersonal to them, therefore they're very easy to, throw it away. Without adequate consideration. And both approaches are flawed to some extent. We can't rely on our experience, and we can't rely on dismissing experiences. We have to really analyze them and try and see them for what they are without prejudice. And that becomes the biggest problem in science because actually William James said that a great many people think they're thinking when they're merely rearranging their prejudices, and that actually holds true. It's a sad fact in science. But hopefully the way to bridge parapsychology with mainstream academia is to build bridges. I've seen some steps in that direction. The work of Stanley Crippen, another parapsychologist, is moving towards that. I've noticed some parapsychologists don't even like to confront the skeptics. Some of them just dismiss everything they say, and it's probably because they consider them ignorant. But a lot of skeptics, or outside skeptics, have very good criticisms. Ray Hyman's offered some good criticisms in the past, and so has Richard Wiseman and other people. But the fact is, and I don't necessarily, a lot of parapsychologists are some of the best skeptics toward the field because they are in the know they are a part of the field, and therefore they can offer some of the best criticisms. A lot of the skeptics or cynics, some of them are cynics, some of them are legitimate skeptics. A lot of them come from outside the field, so therefore they may not know as much about the research. Some of them do, some of them don't, and it varies. It definitely varies. But the way to actually deal and make parapsychology expand and become a part of psychology, as it originally was, to some extent. Psychical research and psychology have very similar roots. Psychology could be seen as something that emerged from areas of inquiry and basically scientific investigation that emerged from investigating spiritualism and phenomena associated with that. But the best way to deal with people who dismiss this type of research is to get a chainsaw. And have you ever seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? No. The best thing to do is to build bridges and see if we can get to the root of these problems, because that's the most important thing, whatever they end up being the result of. Whether all claims of paranormal phenomena have explanations that we already can provide, or whether they involve something more, is a matter for debate. And future investigators, who I consider myself one of those future investigators, actually, I intend on getting very involved in this and trying to build bridges between psychology and parapsychology, because they're very closely related. They really are. Anyways, that's a status update from me. I made it a bit too long and drawn out. I really need to kind of write out scripts before I film these to keep everything concise, because I do ramble. But that being said, I hope you enjoyed this, and I will try to post some videos in the future dealing with magic, conjuring, mentalism, parapsychology, claims of paranormal phenomena, and the like. I don't really have any views on these phenomena aside from, well, obviously we all have views on these things, but I think most of them are due to perfectly normal explanations. Now, whether or not any of them involve something more is a matter for debate, but I am very, very open to that possibility. I hope you enjoyed watching this, and stay tuned. Alright, thank you very much.